Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
For roughly 2,000 years, people walked 14 miles from Athens to Eleusis, entered a dark hall that held 3,000, and experienced something that none of them ever described. The penalty for telling was death. Diagoras of Melos had a bounty on his head for mocking the rites in public. 1 talent if you killed him, 2 if you brought him in alive. Alcibiades lost his command, his property, and nearly his life for staging a drunken parody at a private party in 415 BCE. Aeschylus, the greatest tragedian of his age, stood trial for letting something slip in a play. The Athenian state treated the secret of Eleusis with the same seriousness it treated treason. And yet, the silence was not enforced by fear alone. Cicero said that Athens had given nothing greater to the world than these mysteries. Sophocles said only the initiated truly lived. Pindar said the initiate knew the end of life and its God-given beginning. These were not frightened men. They chose silence because what they had seen was worth protecting. Eleusis sits on the Saronic Gulf, 20 kilometers northwest of Athens. The sanctuary of Demeter and Persephone occupied a hillside overlooking the sea. People have worshipped here since the Middle Bronze Age, around 1900 BCE. The cult of Demeter may reach back to the Mycenaean period, around 1500 BCE. The heart of the sanctuary was the Telesterion, the initiation hall. After the Persians burned it in 479 BCE, Ictinus, the same architect who built the Parthenon, redesigned it as a near-square hall measuring roughly 51 meters on each side. It could seat up to 3,000 initiates on tiered stone benches carved into the rock along all 4 walls. At its center stood the Anactoron, a small rectangular stone chamber that only the Hierophant could enter. The sacred objects were kept inside. The Hierophant emerged from it at the climax of the ceremony. The mysteries were open to anyone who spoke Greek, regardless of gender, social class, or whether they were free or enslaved. After Rome absorbed Greece, Latin speakers were admitted too. The greater mysteries occupied 9 days in the month of Boedramon, roughly late September. No single ancient source gives the complete schedule, but we can piece it together from inscriptions, passing references, and hostile Christian accounts. On day 1, the Hierophant announced the festival from the Stoa Poikile in Athens. Murderers and barbarians were told to leave. Everyone else was welcome. On day 2, the cry went up, Holiday Mustai, to the sea initiates. Each one walked to the Saronic Gulf carrying a piglet. They washed themselves and the piglet in the salt water. Days 3 and 4 were given to sacrifices. Late arrivals could still be admitted on day 4, which was named for Asclepius, the healing god, who, according to tradition, had himself arrived late for his own initiation. Day 5 was the great procession. Thousands of initiates walked the sacred way, the 14-mile route from the sacred gate in Athens to the sanctuary at Eleusis. They wore myrtle wreaths and carried torches, chanting the name Iakos, a deity identified with Dionysus. At the bridge over the Cephisus River, bystanders lined the banks and hurled vulgar insults at the passing procession. This ritual abuse, called gephorismos, may have served to humble the initiates before their encounter with the divine. The procession arrived at Eleusis after dark. Day 6 was the initiation night. The initiates fasted all day, imitating Demeter's grief for her stolen daughter. They broke their fast by drinking the Kykeon. Then they entered the Telesterion. What happened inside was divided into 3 categories: dromena, things enacted; deiknimena, things shown; legomena, things said. The content of each category is the secret that held for 2,000 years. Day 7 was an all-night vigil, dancing in the Rarian field where grain was said to have first grown. Returning initiates who had waited at least 1 year could undergo a higher degree of revelation, called the epopteia. Day 8 was the pourings, libations for the dead, poured from special vessels. 2 were filled, 1 placed toward the east, 1 toward the west, then overturned, while the priest called out, "Hai, Ke, rain, conceive." Day 9, the initiates walked back to Athens. Now, the Kykeon question. The Homeric hymn to Demeter describes the drink as barley, water, and pennyroyal. On its face, this is a peasant barley drink. Homer mentions Kykeon elsewhere as an ordinary beverage, nothing psychoactive about it. In 1978, 3 scholars changed the conversation. R. Gordon Wasson, a mycologist, Albert Hofmann, the Swiss chemist who synthesized LSD, and Karl Ruck, a classicist, published The Road to Eleusis. Their argument was that ergot, a parasitic fungus that grows on barley, was the active ingredient. Ergot contains lysergic acid amide, or LSA, which is psychoactive. The barley in the Kykeon was not clean grain, it was infected grain, and the infection was the point. The problem was chemistry. Raw ergot is also toxic. But in February 2026, a laboratory study published in Scientific Reports demonstrated that ergot can be detoxified using only ancient technology. Wood ash dissolved in water creates lye. Boil ergot in lye for 2 hours, and the toxic compounds break down, while the psychoactive ones survive. The doses they measured fall within the range that produces altered states of consciousness. The chemistry works, but does the archaeology? At Mos Castellar de Pontos, near the ancient Greek colony of Emporion in modern Catalonia, archaeologists found ergot residue inside a ceremonial vessel and in the dental calculus of a buried man. The site contained a sanctuary dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. Ergot in a Demeter cult vessel, at a Greek colonial site. But no ergot has been found at Eleusis itself. Walter Burkert, the most authoritative scholar of Greek religion in the 20th century, argued that fasting followed by a communal meal would have been enough to produce communal bliss without any chemical help. Both views have genuine evidence. The question is open. What was shown to the initiates? Plutarch described the experience: terrors, shuddering fear, amazement, then a light that moves to meet you, pure meadows, songs, dances, and holy apparitions. Hippolytus of Rome, a Christian polemicist writing around 220 CE, claimed the climax was the Hierophant holding up a cut ear of grain reaped in silence. After 9 days of walking, fasting, darkness, and whatever the Kykeon did or did not do, the supreme revelation was a stalk of wheat, life from the dead ground. The myth behind all this comes from the Homeric hymn to Demeter. Persephone was gathering flowers when the earth opened and Hades seized her. Demeter searched for her 9 days, carrying torches. She arrived at Eleusis, sat by the well, refused wine, asked for Kykeon. She caused a famine. Zeus forced Hades to return Persephone, but Persephone had eaten pomegranate seeds and would go back to the underworld for part of each year. The earth blooms when she rises and dies when she goes back down. The ritual mapped onto the myth at every point. The initiates' fasting mirrored Demeter's grief. Their Kykeon was her Kykeon. Their torchlit walk was her search. The darkness to light revelation was Persephone's return. Roman emperors sought initiation. Augustus was initiated in 21 BCE. Hadrian completed both the lesser and greater mysteries in 124 or 125 CE. Marcus Aurelius and Commodus were initiated together in 176 CE. The last emperor to kneel at Eleusis was Julian, the final openly polytheistic ruler of Rome, who reigned from 361 to 363 CE. He tried to restore the old gods. He failed. On November 8, 392 CE, Emperor Theodosius issued a comprehensive edict prohibiting all forms of pagan worship throughout the Roman Empire. 3 years later, Alaric and his Visigoths sacked Eleusis. The sanctuary was burned. The mysteries, which had run continuously for roughly 2,000 years, ended in fire. Today, the site at Eleusis, modern Eleusina, is open to visitors. 2 objects in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens preserve fragments of the visual world the initiates knew. The Ninian tablet, a painted plaque from around 370 BCE, is the only surviving artwork that definitely depicts Eleusinian initiation rites. The Great Eleusinian Relief, a marble panel from around 440 BCE, shows Demeter handing sheaves of wheat to the young Triptolemus. George Malonis, the archaeologist who spent decades excavating the site, published the definitive study in 1961. In the final pages, he wrote that despite all his years of digging, he was no closer to knowing what the initiates experienced inside the Telesterion than any other scholar who had never held a trowel at Eleusis. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to The Crazy Alchemist on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. The full article with images is at crazyalchemist.com. Until next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.